Hello, and welcome to the 7th episode of Ireland Reports. I'm your host, Alex Sheridan, and today I am joined by Councillor Linda de Courcy from Independent Ireland to discuss Citywest Hotel. Welcome back to the studio, Linda. Thank you for coming on again. I guess before we get into Citywest Hotel, we should comment on the presidential election, which of course happened last week. Nearly 13% of all ballots cast were spoilt. And in your area, you're telling me that number reached as high as 21%.
Yes, hi Alex, it's good to be back, thank you. I know it was shocking to see the percentage of people. So 1 in every 5 people who voted in Dublin Midwest voted to spoil their vote. And I think it's just very indicative of how people feel generally over the country. I mean, 213, I think, thousand spoiled ballots, which is correct. Monumental. All over the country, obviously, even in areas where you wouldn't expect a high percentage, there was still a significant number of spoiled ballots. So I think it's just people are genuinely fed up. You know, they're just like, we've had enough of this. And so, but in Dublin Midwest, which is the area that I represent, obviously you've got Citywest, you know, there's everything that happened, you know, with the alleged rape of that young child, and then the protests and just people are just fed up, you know, they've had enough.
Yeah. Like I saw somebody make this take, I can't remember who it was, that the violence, it's always regrettable. But can also be avoided. And usually the way you avoid violence, such as riots, is you give people a chance for change at the ballot box. But in this election, they didn't have a candidate to vote for because that candidate was blocked. And then we're also seeing that Fianna Fáil, we have Taoiseach Micheál Martin acknowledging the large amount of spoiled ballots and proposing nomination reform because he's calling it, quote unquote, too restrictive. Of course, Independent Ireland were well ahead of the curve on that, and we're trying to introduce a bill that would encourage a less restrictive nomination process. Is Independent Ireland still powering ahead with that, or is it just going to let Fianna Fáil run away with it?
No, absolutely, we are going to be powering ahead with it. But I mean, we're obviously in opposition. We're not in government, so there's only so much we can do. But plans are definitely afoot to proceed with that. You know, and I think, as you said, I mean, since this whole thing broke out with in relation to the sale of Citywest, you know, the concerns and the questions of the people of Saggart and Rathcoole and Citywest. So Citywest Hotel itself is located in Saggart Village, which is very close to Rathcoole Village, and Citywest, which is Citywest complex, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a massive complex that's been kind of was started in the 1990s. So there's kind of there's the industrial estate part of it, which is actually lovely because it's, you know, it's very green and it's very mature now. So it's very nicely done. But then there's also the residential area. So that's really grown. The first few estates went in there probably 25 years ago. But in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been like literally an explosion of housing estates, but also apartment blocks. So you've got the Citywest area, which comprises the residential and the business. And then you have Citywest Hotel, which is no longer Citywest Hotel, it's now Citywest IPA, which had in its day 2 golf courses. It had the conference hotel, which is 740 something rooms.
And you used to teach a fitness course there yourself?
No, I did a fitness instructor course. So back in 2003, I did a fitness instructor course there. So it was an amazing facility for so many people. I mean, it hosted the Ryder Cup dinner there. Like there's Ardèche have been held there, dancing on ice. You know, like so many things over the years, Irish dancing competitions and everything. Like it's been such an amazing asset, not just to the area but also to the country, to have a really large conference facility that can accommodate thousands of people, where there's space for them to park, and you know there's things for them to do, and there's places for them to eat, you know, as well as stay. I think that's a massive loss, not just to the area but also to the whole country. You know, we don't have another comparable conference centre and resort hotel in the one location.
That's true. I actually don't know a whole lot about Citywest Hotel. When was it that it was turned into a direct provision or IPA centre?
Well, that it kind of obviously during lockdown it was turned into a COVID testing centre. So obviously most hotels in the country were shut down, as you know, in early 2020. So it was turned into a COVID testing centre then. And again, it's a good location for it in that it's very big and there's lots of space. So it facilitated that quite well. But then in 2022, I believe it was turned into, it suddenly switched from being a COVID testing centre to an IPA centre. And then obviously with the outbreak of the Ukrainian war, a lot of Ukrainians, the beneficiaries of international protection,
and would they make up the majority of the population of Citywest Hotel?
It's been in flux because it's like there are Ukrainians that I believe have been there since the war broke out. I know they are moved around as well, but the Ukrainians obviously would comprise mainly women and children. So so they're not really considered, people don't get freaked out when they see lots of women and children walking down the street. And in fairness to the residents of Saggart, they did at the time they opened their doors, they arranged like for buggies and for prams and everything that these mums, who were fleeing a country that had war, broken out, where war had broken out, so they did open their arms and they did everything they could. They bent over backwards to look after these families, most of whom had, husbands or dads or siblings, fighting in the war. So the people of Citywest and Rathcoole and Saggart did their absolute best for the Ukrainian families who arrived. So, but then of course you start bringing in the IPA. So the IPAs are held in what was the conference centre, which is now kind of the IPA hub. The Ukrainians are mostly held in the hotel, which is 740 something rooms. But then there's also the former golf hotel, which is the Arc complex, where Lemongrass restaurant, now that's unfortunately been closed since the riots broke out. So there's another 400 or 500 rooms there with families. You'd see a lot of kind of Middle Eastern families there. So I think most of them would be kind of in there, but it's a massive complex. It did, as I said, have 2 golf courses.
And you have been quite vocal in your opposition to this, it expanding as an IPA centre. And then, I don't know, was it last year that the government just decided to buy it and just turn it into one big IPA centre? So you're effectively never getting that resource, that hotel back. What have you done to represent your constituents and push back on Citywest Hotel with the government's plans?
Well, I've done everything I can in my role as a councillor, which really isn't an awful lot. But it's actually, I think the government's been planning this for a little longer than a year. So I think as far back as December 2023, they were kind of eyeing it. But they kept everything very hush-hush. And even Emer Higgins, who's one of the deputies in the area, she was kind of saying like she didn't know anything about it a few weeks before it was announced that contracts were signed. So either she wasn't being completely honest or else the Cabinet weren't letting her know what was going on. So either way, I think it doesn't look good on Fianna Gael. But I have been trying to, I've obviously been working with the residents. They have been holding peaceful protests since we found out early in May that they were going to buy the hotel. So they've been protesting Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Friday evenings, just like, saying we're not happy with this. We want our hotel back as a hotel. Even when I ran 18 months ago, I was like, look, Citywest should be returned to the area as a local amenity. I mean, like how many, young kids, they get their first job working in a bar part-time or working in a restaurant or, working, as a chambermaid, like, all these things that would have been available for your first job. It's close to home, like, so you don't have to go far, so your parents don't have to be worried. If you're coming home late at night, it's only a 5 or a 10-minute walk. It was a great, people would go up for dinner, they go for drinks. And also then people who were staying in the hotel would walk into Saggart, and do business in the area, eat a meal in the area. Like, so it was great for the village of Saggart because Saggart is a small village. So it was a great, it worked both ways. It benefited the residents of Saggart and also the people who were staying in the hotel could come and enjoy because Saggart's a lovely little rural village. So I have been doing what I can, trying to force. So one of the interesting things with all this, without getting too deep into it, because it's kind of a complicated thing, is so as has been, and Matt Tracy and Gript has done an awful lot of work with me. We've been working this. But the state is required to advise the council, so South Dublin County Council in this case, that they're actually taking an apartment complex or a hotel or an office block and going to turn it into an IPA centre. So it turns out, after a lot of going back and forth with South Dublin County Council, I was able to get them to acknowledge that actually the state didn't do this. So the state was negligent in its duty authority to actually inform South Dublin that it was taking it over as an IPA centre. So South Dublin County Council is responsible for ensuring that all the fire certs are up to date and relevant. And it turns out from information that was released recently, I have it here, that the fire safety certs for Citywest are not complete. And in fact, none of the fire safety certs, there was a pilot study was done on 20 IPA centres, none of them are actually complete. So the government has been negligent, not only to the residents of the local communities where they're putting these IPA centres in, but they're not doing their due diligence to ensure that the fire safety certificates are up to standard. So they've been negligent to not only the people of Saggart, but also the families, the young families, the Ukrainians and the other families staying in Citywest, as well as the IPAs. They have been negligent on every level in relation to ensuring that fire safety certs are up to standard and not doing their due diligence in letting councils know this is actually what we're doing, so that the council can get involved as well, because the council, as I said, is responsible for the fire safety certificates.
And is this a method of helping pushing back on the IPA centre there? Is this a way of maybe getting it shut down or moved elsewhere? What can you do in your role as a councillor to try and resolve this issue in the area? Because obviously we had a horrendous crime take place against a 10-year-old girl, and who's to say that something like that might not happen again?
Yeah, and again, this is the issue. So we've had a community engagement team start to liaise with us, and again, the information that we get back is just so wishy-washy. They're just reiterating the same thing, that people are fleeing, war. They're here for international protection. They're not actually answering the questions. There's been some residents of Saggart who've put in all fairness, Michael Collins of Independent Ireland has been great. He came to meet residents of Saggart when they went to protest outside the Dáil before the sale went through. And he's also, we've been putting in PQs, parliamentary questions, composed by people in Saggart who just have genuine concerns about the total lack of diligence and the government doing its due diligence and making sure that it will be, the whole system will flow well, because it's clearly not flowing well.
Are any of those parliamentary questions being answered though? Because I've found in the past that the government would just either not take the question, say it's argumentative, or refuse to answer. Has there been any?
We did get some answers, but then again, it's the same kind of paragraph. Like, we're helping. We have our international obligations. We're looking after people fleeing war and persecution, and there's no. Okay, well, actually, we need to look after the people of Saggart
exactly,
as well.
And the perpetrator of that crime. How is he still there if he was served deportation orders over a year ago? Is it still a centre for? You can still be a resident even though you're declared as not being a refugee or not applicable in Ireland. How does that work out?
It's interesting. As I understand, the alleged perpetrator he was not actually a resident in Citywest, so which makes it even more sinister that someone who had a deportation order, I think probably from last March, so over 6 months ago, he had been given a deportation order, but he was still in the country. So I want to just read out. So again, we got more information from the community engagement team on Tuesday, I believe, the day after the incident occurred. So, because I think this just shows how weak the response of the state is. Just shows how weak their process of removing people is. So a deportation order is a legal order to leave the state. The enforcement of deportation orders and the detention of people prior to the removal is an operational matter for the Garda National Immigration Bureau. Individuals who have been issued with a deportation order are required to present. So it's, you're told you get a deportation order, and then you're told, well, you have to go see the guards here. So this is what, so we're saying, dear Alex, we're really, really sorry, but you just can't stay in the country. So if you wouldn't mind, if it's no bother, would you go to the guards and would you just present yourself and say, please help me leave the country? So they're required to present themselves in accordance with the conditions of their deportation order. Failure to do so may result in arrest. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if you have been given a deportation order, we're very sorry, but it's slán agus beannacht, straight away, get you, in a detention centre. It's, it can be a very nice place, but you kind of a holding area, and then we'll get you on the first flight back to your home country. That's what a deportation order should be. They've already been, this particular man, I understand, was in the country 6 years, and there's some reports I've heard that he'd been in the UK before that. So he's been, he's been playing the system, I would imagine. So
6 years is a long time.
It is a long time.
Is that generally how long it would take for an asylum seeker's application to be processed? How is it that long?
I understand it can be longer as well. Some people are here 8, 9, 10 years, because they can appeal and they can appeal and they can, they can do this. And then obviously, like things can run very slowly. And then clearly, like you get a deportation order and you can just ignore it. There's no robust system in place. I mean, and I know the current minister is doing a little more than the past minister, and that's just not saying much, in all fairness. Like we all know, like the last Minister for Justice, I'm not sure what she was doing. But I mean, and he is making a big song and dance about chartering planes and kind of deporting some people. But I know there was, I believe it was a group of Georgians. They were like, I think it was 23 or 24 were deported, but like the same week, another 23 or 24 came in and claimed asylum. So it's like, what are we doing? We're spending tens of thousands to charter a plane to send some guys home. And in literally the same week they're coming back.
What is the solution to that, though? Is this something like a policy change that independent Ireland can try drive through? Does Ireland need a form of an equivalent of ICE over in America to specifically track down people who have overstayed their visit or their served deportation orders? Or do we just need to be a lot stricter on entry requirements for asylum seekers?
I think it's all of the above. I think, first of all, we need to de-incentivise people coming. At the moment, it's extremely attractive. Like there was obviously last year, I think that Britain was looking at, bringing people seeking asylum to Rwanda, so obviously that was unattractive. So there's loads of people who were in the UK who came across the border. So I think we are a very attractive company. Denmark have really tightened their borders. Sweden have, even Germany have. Like Hungary doesn't take any asylum applicants. Poland, I don't think, takes hardly any. Italy is, like every country pretty much, with the exception of a few, is making it harder for people to come and claim asylum. And again, Micheál Martin said 80% of these people are not asylum seekers, they are economic migrants. So they're coming in with the few genuine people who may really need asylum and are really fleeing for whatever reason for their life.
I think it's a statistic on that. You said 80%. It was reported by News Talk last year that 80% of applicants at Dublin Airport show up with no identification documents. So that must mean that they're destroying them on the plane.
Absolutely. And I mean, and again, so you're saying, what can we do? First of all, we do need to make sure, like, no passport, no entry. Like, I mean, it's not rocket science. If you or I flew home and we were like, oh, I lost my passport on the plane, you'd be in a lot of trouble. Like, I'd have my driver's license, so I could probably make a good case for here, I am really Irish, let me in. But I mean, these people who clearly have no link to the country are arriving in, and Deputy Kenneth Flynn of Independent Ireland said in the Dáil the other week, like someone actually, when he was asked how he got here, he said hot air balloon. Like totally taking the mick. And people have such disrespect, not everybody, but clearly some people have such disrespect for our land and our borders and our sovereignty as a nation that they're coming in saying, oh, I came here by hot air balloon, like, and it's like, so we need to tighten the immigration controls. Again, no passport, no entry. Like, and if you have no right to be here, if you're from a safe country, and I've been saying this since before I got elected, it's okay, go home. You're coming from a safe country. We have no legal requirement or obligation to take you and house you and give you a medical card and put your needs above the needs of Irish people. Secondly, again, our Independent Ireland policy has been that IPA centres should be subject to the same planning regulations that you or I would be.
That's true. They don't have any, they don't need planning permission.
They don't need planning. Yeah. And then there's this Section 5 exemption. Like, so I live in IPA Central. So there's a big office block just like literally less than a kilometre from my house. It's Dalkin House. So that's the old SIAC office building. And that they now have a Section 5 exemption. So they're basically free to do whatever they want. They could build a 16-storey apartment complex there and house 3,000 IPAs, and we wouldn't be able to object to it at all. So they're being given the people, obviously, and there's billions being made, so there's a small number of people who are making billions. Nick Delahanty, as you know, has done massive work on that. I'm not going to even claim to be an expert on all the background shenanigans going on there. But, so you've got a system where it's rigged against people who want to put an extension in or do this or that, but it's rigged in favour of, and there's some Irish entrepreneurs, but then there's other foreigners coming in as well, buying an empty shell of a hotel or whatever and turning it
it was
into
in
an
Tipperary
IPA.
that was similar as a situation as you described. Is some American businessman had bought a hotel in Tipperary. I can't remember exactly which town it was, but the announced intention was to reopen it and hire people and give something to the community, have an amenity. And then I guess it was just cheaper and more economical to make it an IPA centre.
Yeah, it is, because if you're an IPA, you're not going to be cooling down after you get your room service saying my steak isn't hot enough. It's like it's running a hotel isn't exactly the cheapest business. It is quite costly, and but it's also the asset to the community and I don't think a lot of people realised how much of an asset the hotels were. And even though Saggart is not a rural village, it used to be a rural village, but it still would be in a relatively urban area. The loss of the hotel is a massive, and apart from who's in there now, but just suddenly not having that hotel would have been such an asset, like communions and confirmations and family functions and, like going out to celebrate your granny's 90th birthday, you go somewhere close.
It's funny what you're saying. If would I be correct in saying that we need to make it less economically attractive for bogus IPA applicants, but also less economically attractive for businessmen to turn their hotels or turn a hotel or a block of flats into an IPA centre.
I think even just to make it so that they actually had to apply and use the same, so you and I could object if one was going up in our area. And I think if that was even put in place, then that would eliminate the vast majority of IPA centres, because no one's going to say, a few people might. I'm not saying nobody. Some people might think it's a great idea, and there's always a few people who think, oh yeah, I have no problem with this. It's grand. Sure, they have to go somewhere. But the vast majority of people that I speak to, and you hear stories from around the country, they're just not happy with it.
Exactly. I guess my other question to you then is, because we just had the presidential election, 13% spoiled votes. That election also had Fianna Fáil nominate a candidate who had to withdraw over scandalous reasons, not paying €3,300, repaying it to a former tenant. And then before that, Simon Harris was looking a little bit shaky with the scoliosis scandal. So you have Micheál Martin and Simon Harris do not look very popular within their own parties. Also doesn't really look like they, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, are working together as tightly as they used to. Do you think that we have another election coming up, or do we have to wait 5 years before we can make any change in the ballot box?
I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know. I think they're kind of in bed with each other, and I think they're so desperate to hold on to power they'll probably do anything to stay there as long as possible.
But we do have a by-election now that I'm reminded of it.
We do, yes.
And that would be Noel Thomas, also from Independent Ireland. He'd probably be contesting that.
He will be, yeah.
Do you think he has a good chance?
I think he does. I haven't studied the ins and outs of the area.
Because it'd be Catherine Connolly's former seat.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So look, he did very well the last time, and we did lose out on a few seats by a small number of votes in several constituencies last time. So I think he's a good guy. He's done an awful lot of work. He's been very strong in the community, and I hope he does well. I think it would be great to get him elected, and it might be again for the people of his constituency. Like, it's a good protest vote. We're not happy with this, because we were talking just before we came on air about when you look at the 100% of the voter, the ballots, and that Catherine Connolly only got 25% of the vote when you look at 100% of people who could have voted. So nearly 60% didn't vote. So she only got 25% of the vote, which is the far left socialist.
We have it on the screen there.
Yeah. So it's no, that's the whole one, but the one we were looking at earlier. Yeah, thank you. That one there. Yeah. So she got 25% of the as a percentage of the electorate who can vote. So that's not a lot, really.
No.
So if you look at the fact that leaves 75% of people in Noel's constituency who are probably not very happy with the status quo, not very happy with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And I think, in all due respect to Heather Humphreys, they didn't run a good campaign, but you would have thought that she would have done better being a nice, sensible Fine Gael, sensible candidate. But she didn't, and I think there's the result to me shows you have your 25% socialist, left, far left, including Sinn Féin cohort, and they'll always vote that way. But then 75% of people are like, okay, what are we doing? Where's the country going?
We had Declan Ganley on the last show, and he said looking at it from a business perspective, it is certainly a huge gap in the market that is just waiting to be exploited.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me on the show, Linda.
Thank you very much. Great to be on again.
And thank you to our viewers for watching. If you want to get involved in the conversation, please leave a comment below. Also remember to like this video and subscribe to this channel to support it. This has been Ireland Reports. Thank you.